In the last few weeks, we've seen a rise in terror attacks throughout Europe, specifically in France and Germany. Today alone, yet another attack was carried out at a church in a northern French town, and one person was killed. Here in the studio with us today is Director of Research at the IPS, Dr. Shaul Shay, to talk about this increase in terrorism and its effects on Israel. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
So, to begin, what are some of the patterns that we see in regards to this recent rise in terror throughout Europe?
I think that we can see three main types of terror. The first one is what we used to call lone wolf terror. I mean an individual that sometimes inspired by one or another terror organization. Now the trend is to follow the Islamic State, but it can be as well Al-Qaeda or other radical Islamic terror organization. The second type are two or three members of a local cell that are not members in advance in any terror organization, but they decide together to carry out a terror attack. They made all the preparation, and at the end they conduct it, and later on they say that it's on behalf of one or another terror. And the third one are, of course, terror attacks that are planned and conducted by, for instance, the Islamic State, that the orders are coming from Raqqa, and there is a chain of command and logistic preparations and so on. So we have all the three types in the last wave of terror attacks.
Now, why has there been such an increase recently in terror attacks committed in, more specifically, France and Germany?
First of all, I think that the Islamic State is under heavy pressure in the main theater of war against the so-called new caliphate. They lost, since the beginning of 2016, almost 40% of their territory. And they understand that the main battles on Mosul in Iraq and on Raqqa, which is considered to be the capital of the Islamic State, are very close to be conducted. So they try to carry out counterattacks worldwide, including in Europe. And this is one explanation to the current campaign of terror. But the truth is that we are more concentrated on terror attacks in the West. The majority of the attacks are not there. It's in Iraq, in Syria, in Afghanistan, in Bangladesh, and in many different parts. But of course, regarding the Western interest, it is considered less interesting.
Now, here's the big question. The terrorism that we're seeing in Israel, Palestinian terrorism directed against the Israeli state, can that be compared in any way to the terrorism that's taking place in Europe on behalf of ISIS? What's the difference here? Is there a difference?
Look, if we analyze it according to the modus operandi, there is no difference. The terror attack in Nice, only the number of the victims is bigger. But we had many terror attacks of this type using trucks or car or any other vehicle. Stabbing, it's unfortunately almost a daily phenomenon here. So the only new thing is that for Europe, it's new. If we look at the ideology behind, the difference is not a real one. I mean, if we look at Hamas, for instance, which is the main source of inspiration for most of the attacks in the last year in Israel. And we look at the Islamic State as a source of inspiration for these terrorists in Europe. The long-term end state of both is to create what they used to call the new caliphate that will unify all the Muslims around the world, and it's the same regarding all the radical Islamic movements. The only difference is in priorities. For the Hamas, the priority is to liberate Palestine and to create an Islamic state instead of the state of Israel. For the Islamic State or Daesh, the priority was to create now a kind of caliphate and then to spread it to all the rest of the world. But the end state at the end, it's similar.
Thank you so much for coming in.
It was my pleasure.